What's up, everyone? Welcome to Mets Off Day Live, presented by Planet Fitness. Join Planet Fitness for $1 down, $20.99 a month. The deal ends August 14th. I'm your host, Chelsea Sherrod, and we are joined by the Athletic's Tim Britton and the ever so lovely Dani Wexelman of ESPN and SNY. Guys, I'm so happy to have you both on the show. How you doing?
Pretty good. Hanging in there.
Good.
Awesome. Dani? So happy to be here. Where else would I want to be on a Monday hanging out with you, Chelsea? Tim as well. What a gang we have here.
I know. I can't think of a better place, honestly. But we do have so much to talk about after a really long weekend for the Mets. So let's go around the diamond. The Mets are finally done with their wacky West Coast road trip. And it was one to forget about, quite frankly. They went 4-6, ending the stretch by scoring just one run while being swept by the Mariners. It's been the story of the last few weeks, but specifically in the Mariners series, the team really struggles with men on base. So, Tim, I'll come to you first. Was this more a credit to the Mariners pitching and defense, or should we be concerned about the Mets hitting?
A little bit of both. I think Seattle is Seattle in its home ballpark is the best pitching staff in baseball. They had a 2.85 ERA at T-Mobile Park entering this series. It got a bit lower over the course of those 27 innings. So that was going to be a stern challenge regardless of where the Mets were coming from offensively. But we've seen it really outside of a couple games here and there. The big explosion they had against Minnesota, the 9 runs they scored against Colorado in the series finale. The Mets just haven't had the kind of consistent offensive performance that they had in June and early July when they made this run to get back into contention. And that's been, it's reared its head mostly with runners in scoring position, but that's not all that's been the problem. Saturday night, they did not have an at-bat with a runner in scoring position. They need to get more hits regardless of the context.
Yeah, Dani, what do you think?
Yeah, I completely agree. It feels like what you saw from the Mets this past weekend was the ugliest version that they could possibly be. So the good news to me, Chelsea, is that they can only go up from here. They ran into an elite pitching staff, and Tim alluded to that fact. Over the last month, they've been one of the best in all of baseball. Overall, they're starting pitchers. You have a bona fide rotation in the Seattle Mariners. And again, being at home, Sunday Night Baseball, they haven't had Sunday Night Baseball in a really long time. So I think that they were extra juiced up, but the Mets offense right now scuffling a little bit. Seattle took advantage of that, and their defense, you guys, the defense was absolutely ridiculous. It was like a web gem factory all over the field for Seattle. And so that entire combination to me was a huge reason why the Mets couldn't get any momentum, but it's going to be a tall task. If Seattle can get into the postseason, anyone who runs up against them is going to have trouble. Their starting pitchers are absolutely elite, and the relief corps that they have, they're all strikeout machines. And so that's the best of the best in all of baseball, and the Mets struggled with it, but I'm not pessimistic that this is it for the Mets and that they aren't going to be able to overcome this weekend.
Yeah, no, I think that's good perspective. The Mariners were just firing on all cylinders. Dani, back to you on this one too. How much do you think of the Mets' offensive struggles are really attributed to the fatigue from being on the road trip?
Well, let's be honest. That trip seems like a nightmare. That's the last thing that anyone wants to do, is have to go to St. Louis for one, go to Seattle for the weekend, come back. At least they do have the off day today, which is why we're all here. The offense has not looked impressive, I would say, since the All-Star break. Everyone's struggling a little bit. The numbers are down right now, but the good news is you can look at some of the series wins that they've had, right? Obviously sweeping the Yankees. They had the series against the Twins. They did well. The series against Atlanta, which is a huge deal when it comes to the wild card. They're all struggling a little bit, but they did run into a buzzsaw of the Seattle Mariners. They're on the road, those West Coast hours. It's a wonky road trip. So I'm going to chalk it up to that, because I think what the Mets have shown me since the All-Star break is that they are capable of winning, and they have that leadership and the communication, and that Carlos Mendoza is doing a great job. So I'm going to give all the credit here to Seattle and say that the Mets are going to be okay moving forward.
Yeah. Tim, what do you think about the fatigue playing a part?
Yeah, I mean, this was going to be a tough road trip to begin with. That was before they scheduled that game in St. Louis. In between, to play 3 games in 3 different time zones at the start of the week. And then you go, playing in T-Mobile Park is difficult enough when you come from Coors Field into that environment. I wrote the other day, it's like walking off the beach and straight into a tax audit. It's such a dizzying change in environment that you get comfortable at Coors. And look, it's always difficult to go from altitude somewhere else. You're already a little bit tired. The pitches move differently. So it was kind of a perfect storm for things to go wrong over the weekend. And I thought, once Bryce Miller pitched the way he did Friday night, and you had Logan Gilbert and Luis Castillo lined up for the weekend, it didn't look pretty for the Mets, and it wasn't.
Yeah, beach to a tax audit sounds absolutely terrible. So I appreciate that analogy, Tim. Dani, you kind of mentioned it a little bit. Any team that will run into the Mariners in the postseason, potentially, if they're still playing like this, it will be a hard fought battle. Do you think that the Mets will be able to compete against elite pitching down the stretch, especially if they do make it into the postseason?
Yeah, I do. And again, we've talked about the runners in scoring position. They were over. On Saturday, they didn't even have a runner that was in scoring position. And every guy that got on was left on base, except obviously for Sunday Night Baseball. That's a really tough statistic to look at and feel confident down the stretch. But I do feel like, based on, again, the teams that they've played and the way that they've played them, sweeping the Yankees, having a great series against the Twins. The Twins have a really good pitching staff. The Yankees have one of the best staffs in all of baseball. And so does Atlanta. Even if Atlanta has been struggling and the Mets are going to be fighting with them for that third wild card spot, they still have good pitching. It's the offense for Atlanta that's struggling. So I feel confident that the Mets are going to be okay when they get to the postseason and they face that elite type pitching, because now they've seen it and now they know. And not for nothing, by the way, guys, Seattle in their offense had been struggling. They gave up the lead in the American League West. So they have had a rough patch. It's their pitching that's gotten them through. And so it's a good test for the Mets. It's good to see what's your litmus here. It's the Seattle Mariners. And so now you know this is what we're going to have to do if we want to be able to win ball games.
No, yeah, this is necessary perspective, especially for Mets fans who coming off of this past weekend might think that their world is ending. But Tim, do you have any positive takeaways from the team's road trip that the Mets fans can hold on to?
Yeah, I mean, first off is they don't go to Seattle again until 2026. That's the big positive step. And the Mets hadn't been there in 7 years. They probably want to take another 7 before returning. The second is, it was a 4-6 road trip. It was not what you wanted going into that 10-game stretch, especially playing some teams that were struggling in Anaheim and Colorado. But you were a half game out of the playoffs at the start of the road trip, and you're a half game out of the playoffs at the end of it. So you didn't lose any ground in that way. San Diego and Arizona put some distance there, but Atlanta had a tough week and a half itself, so that has kept the Mets right in it. Some other teams have gotten close behind them in San Francisco and St. Louis, but it just makes it for an intriguing race over the final 7 weeks of the season.
Yeah, that's a great point. Okay, let's switch gears to follow the leader. Francisco Lindor has been the one consistent bright spot in the Mets offense since becoming the everyday leadoff hitter. Dani, how does it affect a player's mentality when they're performing at an elite level, but the team struggles to capitalize on their efforts?
I think in the case of Francisco Lindor, he is the exception to every rule that could exist in all of baseball. And so while it would be nice if everyone was stepping up at the same time to support Francisco Lindor, for me, this guy is in a different category. And I almost feel like he thrives when the team needs him the most, what he's been able to do. Listen, he's going to have his 4th 2020 season, maybe his 5th 30 home run season. So it doesn't seem to me like when the team is struggling, it really does affect him. In fact, he finally has hit his groove. I know everyone was groaning about what was going on in the beginning of the season with him not seeing the production, but he always seems to come through and find a way. And so I do think you would want the rest of the guys to follow suit right now. You want Brandon Nimmo and Pete Alonso and JD Martinez to get those bats hot to support Francisco Lindor, because when he gets on, it creates chaos, right? He is the leader of this team. He needs the guys behind him to start doing their jobs, but Lindor, under any circumstances, is elite. And so I do think, regardless of situation, Chelsea, that he's still going to be the exact same guy no matter what.
Yeah, I think you hope that he continues to play this way, and then it has a domino effect with the rest of his teammates. Tim, we've seen Carlos Mendoza make some lineup adjustments recently, including moving Pete Alonso to the 5-hole. What other moves could the front office consider to spark this offense in some way?
I think we'll get into what Brandon Nimmo has looked like since the All-Star break. And he's been the guy who, had been so good when the Mets turned it around from late May through the All-Star break, and since has not really looked anything like himself. The batting average is down around 150. And we talked to him on Saturday. He said he feels terrible at the plate, even worse than he did during his April slump. So I think, Nimmo's been in that 2-hole. He really excelled in it initially when Carlos Mendoza made that switch. But maybe that's something where you try to take a little bit of pressure off of him by moving him down. Maybe swap him with Jeff McNeil in the order. The problem that they're having is, outside of Lindor and maybe McNeil, there's no one who's really on a hot streak. So, moving Alonso down, that's to put Jesse Winker up there. And Winker hasn't hit a ton yet either. So it's tough to find kind of what the corresponding move would be if you're bumping someone down in the order at this point.
Yeah, Tim, let's just stick with Brandon Nimmo here. His average has dropped to 230. He hasn't hit a homer in the second half of the season. Do you think that he is getting into his own head, or do you appreciate his accountability for his recent performance?
Both, really. I mean, it's refreshing to hear a guy be candid about how he feels when he says, I feel terrible. And he feels like he's letting the team down. I did talk to some people with the Mets who wondered, if Nimmo was taking it a little bit hard on himself because of the way he's viewed himself as a leader. That's been something, Brandon's been here for a long time. Obviously, he's the longest tenured player on the Mets. But this year, you've kind of noticed more explicitly how he views himself as a leader. He's mentioned it on a couple of occasions. And on Saturday night, that was very clear the way he said, I'm letting the team down. So he's working on it. He's trying to work through it. But I think the Mets do feel like maybe there's a little bit of an extra burden on him at this point in time.
Yeah, and Dani, as Tim mentioned, Nimmo was a vocal part in bringing the Mets back from their rough stretch in May. How does a leader's slump, though, impact the rest of the team, if at all?
I mean, to hear Brandon Nimmo say things like this breaks your heart because you know how much he cares. And you're like, my guy, like, it's going to be okay. We're all rooting for you. And so I think to an extent, obviously, when one of your leaders is having a hard time, everyone is taking note. But it doesn't mean that also rubs off on the rest of the team. I think ultimately these guys have clearly created this band of brothers and have taken each other under their wing. And they had that conversation in the clubhouse earlier this year. And that's made the difference. And so I would guess that they're actually all just itching to pick him up and to do something for him when he can't get the job done. Historically, we know he'll be okay. This is a tough time to be having a slump right now, but I don't really feel like he's the one catalyst that everyone else is having a hard time because he's having a hard time. And to be honest, when your leader has a rough time, you have the rest of those guys in your clubhouse and in that dugout. The only thing they want to do is pick him up because he is such a good guy. He's kind-hearted and he's always smiling, guys. He's always so happy. Yeah. And so to hear this from him, it hurts. But again, teams ebb and flow. This team, we'll talk about this. This team was not expected to go to the postseason. This year, I had them as a 500 ball club, and they're half a game out, as Tim said earlier, of that wild card race. And so I think it's okay, but things have got to get going soon here.
Yeah, hopefully they do start to get going. One other guy who has had a rough stretch, so to speak, is Francisco Alvarez. He's batting just 185 in the past 30 days. Dani, should the Mets give Alvarez more time to figure out his swing, or do you think that they should keep him in the lineup?
Well, watching Luis Torrens last night, I mean, the arm you can see behind the plate is really powerful. But here's the thing, and it's where I struggle a little bit with the Mets and what's happened the past couple of years. When you bring your guy up and you bring that rookie up, you better let him come up and take his slumps and let him figure out how to get out of them. And so I feel like taking him out of the lineup would be the worst thing for his confidence, the worst thing to figure out his swing. All these guys want to do when they're having a tough time is to get back out there and to keep going and to keep giving it a try and figure out how do I make this work for myself? How do I get to end of this season? And also the club is giving you confidence that, hey, we believe in you. You are our guy. You are our future. And so I do think they should keep him in there, give him a chance to just get those swings and get those reps in and be surrounded by your team. The last thing I want is for him to sit on the bench and have to sulk and think about why he's not doing a good job. But I also understand that this team is fighting now, and they went in because David Stearns went and got guys to make a postseason run. So it's a difficult spot, but I would like to see him stay in.
Yeah. Tim, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's not like Alvarez is as a DH or an all-bat left fielder either. He's a guy who brings a lot when he's behind the plate. Torrens has maybe the best arm in baseball behind the plate, but Alvarez has improved his caught stealing percentage since the start of the year. I think he's caught 9 of the last 27 runners. And you've heard a lot of different Mets pitchers talk, really praise the way Alvarez has handled the pitching staff. Jose Quintana has talked about it relentlessly over the course of this season. Paul Blackburn, who's had Alvarez catch him just the first 2 games he's played with the Mets, has been really impressed by what Alvarez brings behind the plate and the way he's directed Blackburn through those 2 starts as he's been kind of changing his pitch mix. So I think Alvarez still brings you something. Maybe instead of starting him every 2 out of every 3, you start him 3 out of every 5, something like that. But it's tough on a younger player. He had the thumb injury earlier. Hand and oblique injuries are always things that seem to linger for hitters over the course of the season. I wouldn't be surprised if Alvarez put together a hot streak, between now and the end of the season and looks more like the hitter the Mets expected when they first called him up.
Yeah, I agree with you both. I think that he should stay in the lineup, and the best way to work through a slump is to just get through it. Pete Alonso, though, hit 2 home runs in the Mets' final game against the Rockies, but he still struggles with runners in scoring position as well. JD Martinez also hasn't been himself lately. It just seems like when it rains, it pours, so to speak. Tim, starting with you, is there any player that you are particularly concerned about, or do you believe these guys will find their groove down the stretch?
I mean, I think everyone will probably find a better stretch at some point in time. It's just a matter of, is there enough time for that to matter? In the wild card race. Alonso is the guy that, coming into the season, the Mets and Alonso said all the right things about playing in his contract year. That he's a guy who's handled pressure well in the past, and the Mets believe that he could handle whatever pressure a contract year throws at you. But I go back to a conversation I had with Brandon Nimmo in spring training where he said, you can be rational about the whole process. You can know that you hit free agency and you're going to be judged off of 7 years in the major leagues. But when you're in an 0 for 15, you're not thinking that way. You're thinking about what you might be costing yourself in free agency. And so for Alonso, I know he said earlier in the week that he feels like he's having a really good season. He had the 2-homer game in Colorado, but there have been stretches where it's looked like he's been pressing a little bit, and that's manifested itself mostly with runners in scoring position, where he has been a terrific hitter throughout his career with runners in scoring position, an OPS over 900. That hasn't happened this year. You kind of want him to just calm down and find himself in those spots, have a really good series, and build off of that and kind of take off.
Yeah. Dani, how about you? Anyone you're concerned about?
I think the concern is a general concern right now, because if you look at the post All-Star stats, everyone is down, maybe except for Francisco Lindor and Jeff McNeil, which we talked about earlier. But I would say that I would love to see Brandon Nimmo get going. I feel like he's the heartbeat of this team. He's the guy that everybody looks to. He's like a pillar for these guys. And so when you have someone of that stature and someone who creates such good energy for your team and they're going well, I do think that can rub off. And I know I said earlier that when you're having a hard time, I don't think that rubs off on the other guys. I think everyone is just having a bit of a slump right now. And we can say it's the schedule. We can say it's the Mariners, but they do need to get the gears going a little bit. So I would love to see Brandon Nimmo start to hit the ball a little bit more, start to do the things that he knows how to do really well. And also so then he can stop feeling so bad, feeling like the whole team is resting on his shoulders, because it's not. This is a whole lineup. It's 1 through 9 that's really got to get the job done for everybody.
Yeah, I think the fact that the Mets are still in the position that they are in the wild card race while their top guys aren't performing as well does kind of give some optimism for the rest of the season, hopefully. But speaking of the heartbeat of a team, let's bring in our social media king, Matt Spenley, who is the heartbeat of the show. Honestly, he has to keep things light for us. Yes, you are, Matt. Thank you so much for joining us. What is our viral moment?
Chelsea, you were too kind. Thank you. So switching gears, just like you guys, I'm sure I watched the Olympics and watched the gold medal game with USA basketball. Steph Curry, USA beats France, they win gold. And it's been kind of a discussion in the last couple of weeks, too, with baseball potentially being a sport in the 2028 Olympics. It's been in the past, but 40-man players are not eligible currently to play. We've seen hockey, we've seen basketball, we saw the WNBA take a break this year. So Dani and Tim, I'm just curious for you guys. Would you like to see MLB have players in the Olympics when it comes to LA in 2028?
Yeah, I mean, how can you not watch the end of that game, that gold medal game with LeBron James and Kevin Durant and Steph Curry teaming up and not think of what it might be like to see a U.S. baseball team with, Bryce Harper and Mookie Betts and Bobby Witt Jr. in the same lineup. An incredible all-star team against other countries that could throw pretty decent lineups at them right back, So I think, there's been a little bit of momentum toward that. Rob Manfred's already talked about considering it and talking with the LA committee about how it might work. It's tougher logistically for baseball than I think it would be for any other sport, because you probably have to take like a 2-week all-star break. And like we're talking, the Mets lost some momentum over a 4-day all-star break. So there's some logistics to be worked out, but you got 4 years to figure that out. Let's just let the best players in the world play on the biggest stage.
You guys are going to get me fired up on this Monday. I feel like this is the moment. This is the opportunity for Major League Baseball to put its mark on the sport globally. This would be a huge swing and miss if the league cannot get this done and make sure that Major League players can be in the Olympics, whether it's for Team USA or any other team that's going to qualify to play baseball in 2028. They want to grow the sport. They want to capture the hearts and the love and the attention of younger players, of people who are growing up wanting to be baseball players. Think about all of the millions of kids who watched all of these teams in the Olympics, and now they want to grow up and be an Olympian. Well, guess what? They are probably going to want to go play Major League Baseball and then get to the Olympics. That's how it works. And so for the league to deny this in 2028, that would be a black mark, I think, on baseball as a whole. This is a huge opportunity to grow the game, especially at that youth level. Especially, let's diversify this too, right? Let's make sure that every corner of the country can grow up watching in 2028. The Olympics, they dropped baseball, right? That's a huge mistake. So like I said, I'm fired up, but I really want to see Major League Baseball players in the Olympics in 2028. Bryce Harper already came out and said he wants to do it. You know, there are tons of guys who want to participate, because here's the thing. People want to be connected right now. People want to watch these guys in the Olympics win a gold medal, and we want baseball to be on the biggest possible stage that it can be.
And we've seen what it's done for other international sports with basketball. You see France becoming the power that it became. I mean, the Dream Team obviously was a huge part of what international. Chelsea, before I toss it back to you, just an Aaron Judge quote from potentially playing. There's very few opportunities to get to do that, especially in the prime of my career when I can do it and make an impact. I'd love to. I've never represented my country before. Never really made the cut. Hopefully now I can make the cut. So as Tim mentioned, big stars are all in for it. I think it'd be pretty cool.
Yeah, I think it needs to happen, especially when it's going to be on home turf in LA. We got to get this done. Thank you so much, Spenley. You are our big star, so thank you for joining us. Appreciate you always. Okay, let's switch gears, guys, to early acquisition grades. So the Mets acquired 6 players at the trade deadline, not flashy names, but they've all contributed since joining the team. While their tenure with the team is still early, we would like to get you to grade their performances so far. So Tim, I'll start with you. I want your grade for Huascar Brosabon. What do you think?
I mean, I think it's probably a B so far. He had the one outing in, I think it was Anaheim, where it didn't go well for him. He's pitched well otherwise, pitched really well on Saturday in Seattle. The Mets really like what his changeup does. They're trying to figure out how often he can throw that. I think the question for Brosabon is he a guy who's going to pitch in the 5th and 6th inning of close games, or is he the guy who's going to pitch in the 7th and 8th inning? Right now, it's more early in the game, but he can pitch himself into some bigger spots if he continues to pitch well.
Yeah. Okay, Dani, what's your grade for Paul Blackburn?
I was like, okay, which way is Tim going to go? Is he going to give A, B, C, D, E, F? Like, what kind of grades? Is he going to go 1 through 10? What grades was he going to give? Paulie B for me, I'm going to give him a B+ right now, because I still feel like he's got more to give for the New York Mets. I feel like in his own appearances so far, I think he's got 12 strikeouts through 2 games. And this is a guy who's known. He knows how to compete. He came over from Oakland. Like, he knows how to get things done. He's giving them some length. He's giving them some confidence. So I'm going to go B+ for Paulie B.
All right, B+, I like it. Tim, Ryan Stanek, what's your grade for him?
Yeah, I think this is the one that hasn't quite worked out yet for the Mets, so probably a C or C- with Stanek. He had a rough outing on Sunday in Seattle as that game kind of got out of hand in the 6th inning. And this is a guy who, with the Mariners earlier in the year, was pitching high leverage innings, was a setup man for Andres Munoz late in games. Seattle found him expendable when they added to their bullpen. The Mets want to be able to construct this bridge to Edwin Diaz that includes Stanek and Phil Maton and Jose Buto and Daniel Nunez when he's back healthy, Reed Garrett. Like, they want to have all these different options, and Stanek hasn't proven yet that he can join them.
Yeah, Tim mentioned Phil Maton. Dani, what's your grade for him?
Yeah, I like Maton. I like what he's done. Batting average against is 179. He's only given up 1 home run, and I think he's a part of the whole, right? I like what he's done. I'm supposed to give a letter here. I'm gonna go B- so far. I will say the combination of all these arms, while not sexy, Chelsea, you mentioned that, they have improved the bullpen. Last month, they have been better. They've been a top 10 relief corps. So I'll go B- again, still room to grow, but I like what he's done so far.
Okay, Tim, last one for you, Jesse Winker.
I think this is probably a C+ at this point. Winker's hit the ball hard. He's probably deserved better results than he's gotten. But, you get the better grades when you actually get the results on the field. I've been a little bit surprised when they acquired Winker. I thought he was going to start every game against right-handed pitching until Starling Marte came back. That hasn't been the case yet. They've opted to play some Tyrone Taylor in the outfield for defense. So I think he's still trying to get his legs under him as an irregular player, not as a guy who's playing every day as he was with the Nationals. And that could take some getting used to. It might get more complicated when Marte comes back. That adds another option in the outfield. But I think he's a guy who should be able to build a little bit on what he's done so far.
Yeah. And here's a bonus for you both. Dani, I'll come to you first. Do you think David Stearns regrets not making more definitive decisions, whether that be to be a buyer or a seller at the trade deadline?
No regrets, Chelsea. No regrets. No, I don't. I feel like this is kind of what David Stearns does. And he finds some diamonds in the rough, guys that are doing a good job, that are playing consistently, that don't cost you a lot. Because let's remember, at the end of the day, the Mets want to build their farm system. They have been adamant about that for years now, that they want to continue to grow in that space and have those homegrown guys coming up and being a part of the Mets in the future. And so for what he got and how he added, and man, if you look at the transaction page for the Mets, he's been adding and subtracting a lot. I'm okay with it. I don't think he has regrets because, again, this team constructed coming into this year, I think everyone can really agree it was a 500 team, maybe a little bit better. Did not expect them to be a half game out of the National League wildcard race right now.
Yeah. Tim, what do you think? Any regrets?
I think the way David Stearns' career has gone, that he's not a guy who builds his decisions off of what's happened over the last 12 days or so. He's more of a 12-month, 12-year guy. So I don't think he's looking at this in any kind of short-term view. A lot of these moves were made with an idea of what they could do next year or what they're protecting for next year as well. And so, I don't think he's even started the evaluation process on them quite yet.
All right, well, piggybacking off of that, let's look ahead. The Mets come home and play the Athletics. Then they will play the Marlins. Tim, is this a get-right week for the Mets? What do you think?
It's a they better get right week. This is you've got these two teams in last place, and then you go, as you see the schedule there, you get the Orioles, who've got just about as good a record as anyone in baseball. You've got 4 games in San Diego against the Padres team that's been the hottest team in baseball in the second half. You follow that up with 3 against Arizona before you get to the White Sox. So the following week and a half after this is really difficult. So I think this is the kind of week where you have most major league players will tell you, like, just win every series and you're good. You might have to be a little bit greedy against teams like Oakland and Miami.
Dani, what would the Mets record need to be this series to be considered a success?
You guys are always making me do math here. I don't know. I don't know the math on this. They need to play 500 or better, though. I'll tell you this. First of all, do not underestimate the Oakland Athletics. They're one of the best slugging teams in all of baseball. Their pitching has gotten better over the last month or so. Their starting pitchers in particular, their bullpen took a hit when they lost Mason Miller. Thank you. I appreciate that graphic coming up. I'd like them to win 4 of the next 6. That would be really good. I think that would send them in a positive direction, go 4-2 in those 6 games. Do not underestimate Oakland, though. I'm telling you right now, I think the key here for the Mets is to play it moment by moment, out by out, not look ahead to what you have coming up, because the Padres and the Diamondbacks are playing some of their very best baseball over the last month. The Padres could overtake the Dodgers in the National League West. Like, don't get that twisted. And obviously, as you mentioned, Chelsea, Orioles are a really good ball team, one of the best in all of baseball. They just hit 70 wins. So it's just got to be inning by inning for the Mets, and just to be able to capitalize on these sub 500 teams. That's how you get into the postseason.
Yeah, this is a big week for them coming up. Like you both mentioned, the Mets are only a half game behind the Braves for the 3rd wildcard spot. Tim, I think I know the answer to your question already, but has your faith wavered since seeing the Mets struggles in the past week?
No, I mean, I think, as Dani's mentioned, the Mets are kind of where we thought they might be entering the season, entering the All-Star break. I think the big change has been what Arizona and San Diego have done since the All-Star break. If you had told me back, a month ago that one of those teams was going to go on a run, I said, sure. To see both of them now in the position they're in, challenging LA in the NL West, to see Atlanta be the team that's fallen off, that's shaken up the race a little bit, where, I don't think any Mets fan who's been around for more than 2 years is confident in a one-on-one race for a playoff spot with the Atlanta Braves, given their history. But that's how it's kind of shaping up at this point.
Yeah, Dani, you already mentioned how well the Padres are playing, and the Diamondbacks as well, who currently lead the NL wildcard. How do the Mets compare to those 2 teams?
I think that the Padres and the Diamondbacks are better teams right now because they're surging. They're playing some of their very best baseball at this moment. We saw the Mets doing that going into the All-Star break, so we know they're capable of it. And it bears repeating, let's circle it in red pen, put a star by it, that they came into their West Coast series half a game back in the wild card race. They're still half a game back. So while I don't think that they're better than the Padres or the Diamondbacks right in this moment, we do know over the last month, the Mets have had one of the best pitching staffs. That's starting and relief corps. The offense is what's been shaky, but we know what they're capable of. So I feel confident, and I do think that they could go toe-to-toe. I think this is the moment, guys, to take over that third wild card spot, take over where Atlanta is in the wild card standings. Again, not better than the Padres and Diamondbacks at this exact moment, but they have been earlier this year. So they've got to shake the cobwebs off and get this sorted out this week.
Dani, I don't know how a Mets fan can hear you saying that and like not be fired up right now. Like that was amazing. Like I feel like that was such valuable perspective. That's necessary though, especially coming off of the weekend that they had. But I think you're right on.
I like to look at the numbers, Chelsea.
Okay.
I'm a bit statistical sometimes. I don't want to be a shock jock all the time, but let's be realistic here. They're already out kicking the coverage and outperforming where I thought that they would be. I had them as a 500 team not making the postseason. They've played better. They've proved me wrong. And Carlos Mendoza's done a hell of a job managing this team.
Yeah, he has. All right, guys, as we wrap up this episode of Mets Off Day Live, I need to know, Tim, starting with you, how do you plan to spend the rest of your off day?
It'll be nice. I'll spend some time with my kids, and then I might get to repair a dishwasher. So both things will be messy, I am sure.
Wow, dad duties for sure. Oh my gosh. Dani, I don't know if you have any dishwashers to repair, but what's your off day looking like?
Chelsea, I don't have a dishwasher, which is fine. I wash mine by hand. I'll give Tim an A+ though for dad duties for sure. That's where I would grade you on that. Yeah. I actually am going to have dinner with Jenny Cavnard, the Oakland Athletics play-by-play. She's in town. Awesome. She's a dear friend of mine, so I'm going to go see her later today. I have a lot of chores to do, a long to-do list, Chelsea, which I know you also have one of those as well.
Well, that sounds great. Dinner, I know, is going to be amazing. And yes, I'm going to try to get some things done, but also rest today because we all know coming off a West Coast road trip, we've had some late nights. So I'm going to take today slow. But I appreciate you both for all of your perspective and for joining us. Like I said, this past weekend wasn't the best, but this show I think was pretty awesome. So thank you both for joining me. And thank you all for watching Mets Off Day Live presented by Planet Fitness. Join Planet Fitness for $1 down, $20.99 a month. Deal ends August 14th. For Tim Britton and Dani Wexelman, I'm Chelsea Sherrod, and enjoy your off day.